Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our ACEEE webinar, Lower Bills, Warmer Homes, Overcoming Barriers to Heat Pump Adoption. While we're waiting for everybody to get into the room, please put into the chat where you're from and one reason why people might not install a heat pump for home heating in your area. What's one reason? Don't worry about overlapping with other people's reasons. I just want to hear what everybody thinks off the top. Kimberly from Fort Collins. Mustafa from Baltimore. What are some reasons that you think people might not install heat pumps for home heating? In Vermont, many small rooms in the house. Upfront costs are a big one. Thanks. From Saudi Arabia, we have someone. Upfront costs. These are going by pretty fast. Ann Arbor, concerns over cost. Yes, we will be talking about that today. Boulder, Colorado. High electric costs I'm seeing a number of times, electric costs relative to gas, having to upgrade your home. These are all great answers. I'm thrilled to say that we will be tackling a lot of these today. My name is Reuven Sussman, and today we have 4 speakers. I'll be doing a little bit of speaking, but I'm mostly doing the hosting responsibilities. My name is Reuven, and I direct the Behavioral Health and Human Dimensions program at ACEEE. Matt Malinowski is the director of the Buildings program at ACEEE. Together, with 2 others, we co-authored a report that we'll be talking about today. We also have Dimitris Vantis from Con Edison, the manager of the Decarbonization Strategy and Planning, and Carousel Rinaldi, president and CEO of Andil Policy Group, who's done a lot of work with contractors. So we'll hear a lot about the financial and non-financial reasons for not upgrading. So before we get started, just want to make a note, please engage with us. I'll be monitoring the chat for discussions and questions you have in there. So go ahead and talk throughout the session. Use the Q&A button to ask direct questions. You can also upvote questions using thumbs up. We'll field as many of your questions as we can at the end of all the presentations. So keep it coming, and I will be noting that, and I'll field the questions to our speakers afterwards. So let's get back to our opening question. Why don't homeowners electrify home heating? Well, we heard a lot about the financial aspects. People worry about their bills going up, and in some cases, those worries can be founded. In this webinar, we'll talk about the financial reasons, the ongoing bills, rates that can help, energy efficiency that can help. And we'll also talk about some of the non-financial barriers. Even if the math works, why don't people upgrade? Well, we have some ideas around that. You can find them in the report that we just released, and you'll also hear something a little bit from Carousel Rinaldi on contractor perspectives later in today's webinar. And there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. I'm going to throw it to Matt to start the discussion about rates, rate structures, and how to keep bills down. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Reuven. Hi, my name is Matt Malinowski. I'm the Buildings Program Director at ACEEE, and I'll be walking us through rates that keep bills down. I just put the link to the report in the chat, so you can have any details that you'd like after the webinar. But I'll keep us focused on a broad overview here about how rates can help with the financial barriers to electrification. So as we know, electrification has many benefits. It helps mitigate climate change. It improves health of the people living in homes. But there's a major perception that bills will increase, which can sometimes be the case. And so in this report, we looked at electric rates that avoid these increases. So just a brief summary of our methodology. We simulated energy bills in 4 cold states, Maine, Minnesota, Colorado, and Connecticut, using ResStock modeling. So these are hourly models of archetypal homes in each state that give you electric and gas loads, and then also the results of upgrading those homes with heat pumps and energy efficiency. And we took those outputs, model outputs, and applied realistic rate structures based on those offered by the largest utilities in each state. So that's kind of the novelty of this approach, is we didn't look at average rates, we didn't look at average heat pump efficiencies, but really looked at performance in each hour of the day and year and the corresponding utility rates to see what would really make a difference. Just a brief overview of what we can say with some confidence here, which is that heat pumps are more efficient than electric resistance heat. They are more efficient and more cost effective than oil and propane in terms of bills. They'll reduce your bills. But the challenge is with natural gas. Natural gas is less expensive, much less expensive in some cases than electricity. And heat pumps sometimes can't make up that difference. They often save money versus natural gas, but not always, as we'll see in the subsequent slides. And this is exacerbated, of course, by in some states, gas is much cheaper than electricity, as well as the colder it gets, the bigger a hit the heat pump takes to performance. And so it, again, can't make up that cost difference in some cases. But rates can go a long way to fixing this. So if you can imagine just a basic flat rate that doesn't change with the time or the season, the thing to understand is that electricity, the wholesale price of electricity to distribute and generate it changes throughout the day and throughout the season. And so if you have a flat rate, customers using electricity during peak periods are underpaying for that electricity during that time, while those that use a lot of electricity during off-peak periods are overpaying, right? Because the electricity should be cheaper then. And those peak periods in the northern states where we're looking typically occur during the day in the summer. So when there's a lot of air conditioning, there isn't a lot of electric heating in the states where we're looking. And so as a result, the summer electricity is the most expensive. But heat pumps increase the load at night and during the winter. And so currently, under these flat rates, those heat pump customers are being overcharged. And it's just an example of the electric load in a home, in the average Connecticut home in January, when it uses natural gas, and then heat pump, right? You can see a lot of that load is occurring at night, late at night. So what kind of rate structures could reflect the cost of service and be better for heat pumps? Well, again, we're looking at the winter versus the summer peaks. So rates that take into account these seasonal changes and offer lower costs in the winter. Time of use. So again, maybe not during the afternoons. Demand-based rates, that was an interesting wrinkle that we came across while doing this research, as well as technology-specific discounts. All of these can help reduce the cost burden of heat pumps, make them, in some cases, lower the bills relative to gas, while also in many cases actually benefiting the grid. Next, I'll get into the situations in each state that we analyzed. So we'll start with Maine. There, the electricity and gas, electricity is already priced pretty competitively. So here is the monthly average bill for the homes we analyzed in Maine, the single family homes we analyzed in Maine, with natural gas heating. And then where they just switch to a heat pump using that same flat rate, you see only a slight increase in costs. However, there's also a special heat pump rate that provides a winter discount, but that's balanced by a higher cost in the summer. And so you can really clearly see that the summer bills go way up. But if you look at the average monthly cost, that actually ends up resulting in a decrease. So that to us is a good example of what's possible. Customers pay more in the summer where electricity is more expensive to provide, but get a nice discount in the winter that makes the heat pump, lowers the bills relative to gas. Next, I'll go to Minnesota, where this kind of a winter discount is available to all electrically heated homes. And so again, starting with the total monthly bills of natural gas heated homes. And then what happens when and there's also a time of use rate as well. Not much of a difference. And now we add the heat pump. So you can see, thanks to this winter discount, there's already a nice savings relative to gas. And here's the annual view, or the monthly average. And you can see that the time of use rates didn't make too much of a difference, but that winter discount, which is around 35%, makes a big difference and helps make heat pumps competitive. Colorado also provides a winter discount, but that discount is less. It's around 10% or so. And so you can see that with that default 10% discount, even using the time of use rate, heat pump customers will see much higher bills in the winter. We tried to apply that same discount from Minnesota, the 35%, and now you can see the impact. And once we do the annual averages, you'll see that that makes the heat pumps break even with gas. I think they're slightly more expensive, but pretty consistent with gas. And just a note on the graphs, the whiskers are the standard deviations around the mean. So, roughly 2/3 of the customers would fall within those whiskers. And the last state we analyzed was Connecticut, which, as you can see, has much more expensive electricity than gas. And even with insulation, even with the time of use rates, the heat pump bills would go up for those natural gas households. And so we looked to apply that 35% discount from Minnesota, but even that wouldn't bring the costs within reach. So in Connecticut, we found that rates, or at least rates as they exist in the states we analyzed, are insufficient to bring the cost of heat pumps down to the same level as natural gas. But in the other states, we were able to bring them down. So some recommendations for utilities and state regulators: try to not overcharge heat pumps. They provide a service by using a lot of electricity in the winter during off-peak times. And so heat pump specific rates might be beneficial both to the customers and to the grid. And for federal and state policymakers, the biggest challenge is just bringing down the cost of electricity. And so one suggestion was non-ratepayer based investments in distribution and transmission, or a price on carbon, or clean heat standards that will balance the landscape between gas and electricity. So that's it for me. And back to you, Reuven.
Thank you, Matt. Nicely summing up the key findings of the report. We will be the link to the full report is available, and we have a lot more details in there. I'd like to next invite Dimitris to join us and share his screen. Dimitris, feel free to introduce yourself. Dimitris comes from Con Edison in New York, and we'll talk a little bit about rates and efforts by Con Edison to encourage electrification in that state.
Sure thing. Thanks, Reuven. Hi, everyone. My name is Dimitris Vansis. I'm a department manager at Con Edison, which is the electric, gas, and district steam distribution company serving New York City and Westchester County in New York. So in the ACEEE report that we're here to launch today, the authors speak about the importance of rate design to spur the adoption of heat pumps and identify certain characteristics that heat pump rates should have in order to result in lower bills for heat pump customers. And you just saw the presentation from Matt illustrating certain examples in a few states. So what I'm going to do here is talk to you about the select pricing plan, which is a voluntary electric rate that we have here at Con Edison in our service territory for our electric residential customers, which combines a lot of the characteristics that you see in the report as being favorable for heat pump customers. So we've done some analysis very similar to the work that Matt just described for other states. We did similar analysis here in our territory for actual heat pump conversions that have gone through our heat pump program. And we are now going through a lot of efforts promoting this rate to our customers. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But firstly, wanted to give a very quick intro to our heat pump incentive program that we run here at ConEd. So we operate what is called the Clean Heat program in our territory, which offers incentives to homeowners, to businesses that cover the upfront part, the upfront equipment costs for heat pump conversions. And we've seen significant growth in the program over the past few years, in particular on the residential side, single-family homes or homes with less than 4 units. We've had about 40,000 conversions completed through the end of 2024. I would highlight that the majority, and you can see it on the slide, the majority of the conversions are in fact conversions from gas heating. So we've got a very interesting, fact base here on these conversions from gas to electric that have the more close economics. And then also, I would point out that the majority of the projects that we're getting through the program lately have been going through what we call the decommissioning track, which means that customers ended up decommissioning their fossil fuel heating when converting to a heat pump, and therefore are using heat pumps as their only source of heating. So in 2024, last year, we did an analysis of a small sample, about 80 customers of residential heat pump conversions. These are customers who converted from gas to heat pumps. Yeah, and we used AMI data, interval data on the electric and gas side, to understand both the change in the energy profile of these customers pre and post conversion, and then the change in their customer bills. And these were all conversions that happened in the 2021 to 2022 period. So we're looking at a pre-install period around 21 and a post-install period around 2022, 2023. So what you can see here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this slide, but I've included it because I thought it was very interesting. And what this slide is showing you is the average electric and gas energy use for the sample of customers in the year before and the year after the conversion. So you can see just looking at the energy use alone, how we observe that orange area in the charts, which is representing the heating load for customers, that following the conversion, customers saw a decrease in their heating energy use of about 70%, which is really in line with what we expected, since we know that heat pumps are about 3 times more efficient than fossil fuel heating. So very exciting to see this and verify it with actual project data. Now, moving on a little bit to discuss the story around energy bills. This is similar to the analysis that Matt went through in the previous section. We compared here the total energy bill across electric and gas for the customers in the sample for the period before the conversion, for 1 year before, and then we also have here 2 years after the conversion. And we've included here both the first bar is the bill the year before, the second and the fourth bar is the bill the year after, and then the third and the fifth bar we've included is an estimate of what the customer bill would have been had they stayed on gas for that second year on gas heating. So what you can observe here is that energy bills for customers heating their homes with heat pumps in that kind of 2022, 2023 period were in fact in line with what they would have paid had they stayed on gas heating. In the same analysis, we've also run a sensitivity or a scenario where we assume that customers with using heat pumps for heating also enrolled in one of our voluntary electric rates, which is the select pricing plan. And I'll explain a little bit what that rate is. And you can see the second and the fourth bar here on the chart, that their combined electric and gas bill for the first and second year after the conversion actually went down, and customers would have seen a savings in the order of about 15% compared to what they would have seen had they stayed on gas and compared to if they were on the standard volumetric rate. A few words here now about the select pricing plan. So as I mentioned, this is a voluntary rate that's open to all our residential customers. It's a demand-based rate. So essentially, we're charging customers for the delivery part of the bill on a dollar per kW basis as opposed to a dollar per kWh. So not about energy consumption, about demand. There is a seasonal variation to the rate. It's cheaper in the winter compared to the summer. And there is also a time of use element with cheaper in the off-peak hours, more expensive in the on-peak hours. Here at Con Ed, we have, in the period between 2023 and 2025, we offer a price guarantee for customers switching to this rate, meaning that if you're a heat pump customer, you enroll for the first year, for the first 12 months of being on the rate. We compare your bill, and if your bill ends up being higher on the select pricing plan compared to what it would have been had you stayed on the standard volumetric rate, we pay you back the difference. But what we've observed by having, a couple hundred customers on the rate over the last couple of years is that most of the time we don't end up paying, anything back, because most customers, you see here on the slide, about 84% of air source heat pump customers, about 90% of ground source heat pump customers end up saving money. So compared to the standard volumetric rate. And a little bit about what we're doing to promote the rate to our customers. Obviously, the analysis we've done, as well as the results we're seeing from customers who are enrolled in the rate, are very promising. So we're very excited about the potential for this rate to help heat pump customers reduce their energy bills. We have launched a few marketing campaigns, both to customers participating in the Clean Heat program, as well as contractors who install heat pumps through the program, to educate them on the rate and its benefits. We've taken certain steps to simplify enrollment, making it a lot easier for customers now to just click and enroll rather than having to pick up the phone and call. And we're also scoping the launch of a rate education tool on our website, where it will make it a little more interactive and simplified way of explaining what a demand-based rate is and what are the benefits for heat pump customers. Thank you for the attention. That's all I had prepared. I think it's back to Reuven now to talk a little bit more about behavioral strategies for promoting rates.
Thanks, Dimitris. I love that segue from Matt. And what's great about what you just described is that I'm going to be touching on a lot of the same sort of techniques that you raised at the end there. And in the report, we actually mentioned these in more depth. So I just have a couple of slides here. I guess I'm introducing myself now. My name's Reuven. I'm the next speaker. And here we go. I only have a couple slides before I'm going to turn it over to Kara, who's really the feature attraction here in terms of behavioral barriers, specifically with regards to contractors. Okay, so what are some of the relevant non-financial issues? Once the math works, it doesn't work everywhere, but once it is working, why do people still not upgrade their heat pumps for home heating? I'm going to use some sort of social science lenses to look at this issue. And there's three main buckets that we've identified in the report. Number one, homeowners and contractors lack knowledge or awareness. So there's a sort of knowledge gap. Maybe they aren't familiar with the heat pump technology, or maybe they aren't aware that energy bills won't go up. And so there's ways to increase knowledge and awareness. Kara is going to talk more about the contractor piece. Status quo bias is also important. Even if you're aware, you might be reluctant to switch rate plans. You might be reluctant to go with a new technology you're not familiar with. That's both on the homeowner side and the contractor side. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in the next slide. And then there's what we like to call mental accounting errors. Essentially, that even if your bill is going, even if your overall annual bill is going down, or the average bill is going down, in any given month, it might be up. Or you might be looking at your electricity bill going up and failing to see that your gas bill is going down. And solving these mental accounting issues, one good strategy is what Dimitri suggested, which is, coming up with good visualization tools. But let's dive a little bit more into the idea of encouraging adoption of new rate plans. This is part of the sort of status quo bias. There's a bunch of interlocking issues at play here. One, there's an uncertainty about saving money, and the rate structures are super complicated. It's hard to wrap your head around them. Second, the lack of knowledge about how to save energy. A lot of people do not know which appliances use the least energy, or how they can go about saving energy with those appliances. Third, if you're trying to encourage time of use rates, this is where electricity costs are slightly lower at different times of the day. If there's a perception that you need to change your lifestyle in order to take advantage of that time of use rate, you're going to run up into some resistance. If you think, "Hey, I need to cook my meals or watch TV at a different time," people are just not going to want to do that. When in fact, using heat pumps automatically means you're using more electricity at night than you were before. And then there's simply the idea, I'd rather just stick with what I have. There's a general tendency, it's called the status quo bias, to just stick with what you have rather than change. So we've recommended 4 strategies that you can try if you're running a program like this. 1, create a rate plan that seems simple. It's not always possible to know when people get heat pumps, but maybe if you have a rebate and you see people have cashed them in, it's an opportunity to recognize that. Simply offer a heat pump rate. The easiest thing to understand, if you have a heat pump, you know that that's the way to save the most money. Number 2, you can try changing the default plan. So if you're able to know when somebody has electrified their home heating, you can automatically change them with the option, of course, that they can change back whenever they want. The important piece here is that you must be absolutely transparent and communicative. Repeated communication is really important. You do not want to erode the trust of customers, or anything you try in the future simply won't work. And if you can't change the default, another good option that people aren't often aware of is active choice. You don't have to automatically enroll them in a new plan, but you do have to require them to make a decision. Do you want to stay on the old plan or move to the new one, which we recommend? That's a nice way to kind of get around the problems with defaults, but still encourage some change. Number 3, if you can't make a rate plan that's simple, then make the choice simpler. So to take away that complexity of the rate structure and just provide an energy bill calculator or similar visualization tool that shows what you're using now and how much you would be spending on an alternative plan. This is also helpful for communicating with the customers after they've switched. You don't want to see a backlash against electrification because people are complaining, "Oh, I switched and now my electricity bills are going up." Well, yeah, it goes up in 1 month, but it goes down in another month, or your gas bill is also going down. These kind of tools can be really helpful for that. And the last thing might be helpful, if you can, to offer protections and reassurances for those people who are switching. Trying to avoid uncertainty. People don't know what to expect. If you say, if you really want to, you can always switch back, or you can switch back 1 time within a year, that offers some reassurance that if they make the switch, they won't be punished for it. And those are my recommendations in this particular area. There's a lot more behavioral science talk in the report itself, but I want to save the rest of the time for Kara, who's going to talk about how to encourage contractors to encourage more upgrading. Kara, why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
Right. Can you see my screen?
Oh yeah, looking good.
All right, great. Well, thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate joining this incredible group. I'm Carousel Rinaldi. I'm the president and CEO of the Endel Policy Group, and the Endel Policy Group is a Washington, D.C. based energy and environmental strategy firm, and we work on everything from renewable energy and energy efficiency to grid infrastructure and smart technology and demand response and electrification. So it's really great to be a part of this incredible panel. One of the things that we have done is working with the Building Performance Association, have worked with, done lots of engagements with contractors, hundreds of contractors nationwide, in different states and with many different regulatory structures, to talk about some of the incentive programs that have been coming out. So those are the rebates and the tax incentives, and those matter because that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about what are we doing to encourage and support the transition to electrification, and what are the things that are going to move people to do that. The contractor, and we have released a couple papers on this, some for states and state energy offices to think about, like messages that we were getting from contractors, some to contractors to think about how they can prepare themselves. But for as we're thinking about rates and rate structures, what are the opinions and priorities and feedback related to moving to heat pumps. What do contractors think? And one of the things I love about working with the contractor community is they're very honest. And there's a belief that the systems will be too expensive to run, and they're too worried that customers will have complaints because of that. That they'll say my energy bill is too high now. Last winter it was this, now it's that. This is particularly related, of course, to fuel switching. Worrying about smart technology and disconnection. So if you are doing a full electrification upgrade and you're adding in smart technology, smart panels, smart thermostats, that all of these things could be connected to Wi-Fi. And no HVAC contractor wants to roll a truck because somebody has a Wi-Fi issue. The lack of training and the technology itself. There's a real reluctance sometimes to take on something new. So many HVAC contractors are small businesses, they're generational businesses, and they've been doing this. They've been doing things for a specific way for a very long time, and this could be a full switch in how they do their work, and explaining to them. So they really need a reason for that business model to change. There's a general support for gas and heating systems. The feel of the heat that comes out of one of the contractors said every single time they would switch to a heat, do fuel switching from gas to electric, they would always get a call saying it's not, my heat isn't working. And it wasn't that it wasn't working. It was just the feel of the heat coming from the vent is different. It blows cold versus blowing hot. And it's know that it is heating your house. It's just how this technology works. The need for larger projects to do that fuel switching. Sometimes fuel switching for an older home, and this is again, we're thinking about an existing residential building, not a new building, but an existing residential building. You would have a situation where the ducts and the insulation and it's just not right sized for the level of weatherization that the built environment would need, that the envelope would need in order to move to a heat pump, or that as a result of doing that, they run into other barriers, particularly for low-income programs that were related to mold, asbestos, things like that, and some concern about lack of technology and interoperability. If they're switching out an air conditioner to a heat pump, but leaving in the backup gas system, does that new heat pump work with that backup gas system, or would that gas system need to also be upgraded? So there's those types of, so these are just things that we would hear. But there are ways that when in talking with the contractor community, you would see them, light bulbs go off. These are also we have to remember contractors in the residential space are largely small businesses. They're entrepreneurs. If they can have an opportunity to make money through a new business model, then they're very open to it. So one thing is to connect contractors with training and certification. Right now, you might have heard of something that they call the silver tsunami, which is that there's a lot of contractors that are retiring, which also leads to a lot of new training needed. Pretty much every contractor community really is looking for opportunities and access to training. If we also want these new contractors to be part of a green revolution, or to have jobs that are living wage jobs, they need to have an education to really move these jobs forward. So how do they need training, but not just on the technology, but also on the incentives, on the rates, on how to market this, to help contractors really be able to be that bridge and that educator to the homeowner. Because when somebody's heat pump or furnace breaks, they call a contractor. That's who they call, and that's the first person who's going to be educating them about all of these things. We need to prepare for those barrier mitigations that I mentioned for the whole house view that really electrification looks like. We're looking at electrification across the board. So not just the heat pumps, but also, adding on solar panels, EVs, making sure that home can meet the needs of that home owner as they're expanding and electrifying. So what are the funding sources and strategies that can be stacked together, and how do they stack together? And being able to help contractors address those when they walk in, so that if they just keep seeing a brick wall every time they're trying to move through this installation, they're going to get discouraged. emphasize the operations and procedures and ongoing maintenance. This is one thing I heard many times from contractors as we talked about fuel switching, that a gas furnace might just plug along over years. Yes, it should be serviced every season, but it may go for seasons and just limp along. Whereas a heat pump, really, it's advanced technology. This is high efficiency technology, and it really does need to be serviced every year. So making sure that homeowners understand that, getting them connected to that. And in fact, that also gives an opportunity for remote sensing. If a contractor has a heat pump or that has remote sensing capabilities, they may know in advance what's wrong with that heat pump and be able to not have to roll a truck multiple times in order to get that. They can show up with the tools and the parts needed to fix it. Energy data is a big piece of this, and it's something I think folks aren't talking about as much, which is that all of that data, and we saw some amazing data from Dimitri and others on the today about, and all of this energy data is part of the puzzle, and it's not. And if contractors are part of that data gathering, it's part of explaining how energy efficiency is a resource, just like renewables, just like any other resource. Energy efficiency is a key resource for us. So contractors can be part of that data gathering and making sure we can get access to that data. And I'm sorry, I'm in a room that just shut off its lights. I'm at the California Energy Commission right now, and they're very energy efficient. Encourage contractors to develop replicable project scopes, because one of the things is if we can get a project scope by a contractor in a community, they can replicate. So I had a Massachusetts contractor tell me a great story about how they did a big project at an HOA in a community of townhomes. Well, all those townhomes were built at the same time, were the same square footage, and had they had the exact same issues. So he was able to then kind of replicate what he did for one homeowner for multiple homeowners, and as a result, and spoke at an HOA meeting and explained what he did and what incentives were available to do this, and got a lot of customers as a result. So sometimes being able to be creative that way, and looking at ways to replicate the project, that will reduce time and overhead for the contractor and really be both a moneymaker and a carbon saver. And that's it. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, if I could ask all the speakers to come online. Kara, that was great. Thank you for concisely outlining all the ins and outs of what makes contractors install or not install, and how we can encourage installation. There's been so much great chatter in the chat. And I've tried to summarize the best I can some of these conversations, and I'm going to present them to you, and I'd love to get your feedback. For those of you who want, you can ask questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll ask them to our panels. Okay, so let's start with Matt. We had a series of questions on alternative fuels. So Jean DeJonas mentions that propane refrigerant heat pumps get 165, which, hang on a second. Right, he's mentioning that propane, there could be a very efficient version of propane. Catherine Hoekstra notes that solar panels no longer support her home when she switched to electrification, because now she needs more electricity, and she has trouble, like she can't just add more, she needs to replace entire roof. And on the same topic, could in Connecticut, where Jean asks, in Connecticut, where the 35% winter discount wouldn't even bridge the gap, with solar panel power a solution? So do you have any thoughts on solar power or other alternative fuels as a solution here?
We did not analyze those other fuel sources, or solar panels, I guess, for home generation. We did not analyze those in this paper, but anecdotally, I have heard of people here in the Washington, D.C. area who have installed solar panels and had their electric rates decrease significantly. I mean, that's one of the benefits. So I could see that being a potential strategy. Of course, in the winter, solar panels don't generate as much. So I think it's maybe too case dependent to, whether you have net metering, what the incentives are. It really may vary So I don't know if I can speak to it in a general sense.
Solar panels are expensive in DC in particular. There's a very high net metering provides a lot of financial incentive. This does vary from area to area, so stay tuned for more on that. Dimitris, there's quite a few questions here about energy cost changes, for example. John Rab asks in the Q&A, can Dimitris give savings dollars for ground source versus air source customers? I don't know if that's something you have. And just, Loic Chapos, hope I didn't butcher that name too badly, is asking, is Con Ed tracking utility like gas plus electricity cost increase for those customers that converted from gas to a heat pump under clean heat? And Donald just notes that he saved a bunch of money on his electric bill by switching his old AC unit. Dimitris, any answers to any of those? Do you want me to repeat anything?
I think I got it, the first two. So air source to ground source, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I will say the combination of converting from gas heating to a ground source heat pump and using in our territory the select pricing plan, the demand-based rate, is almost like a guaranteed saver, almost. Most customers would end up saving. On the air source side, it's most, but not as certain. In terms of average level of savings, I think the number that I can give you, I don't have the dollars, is about 10 to 15% of your bill compared to your on your electric side compared to being on the standard volumetric rate. I would say I did look at it recently on the ground source side. More customers save. The average saving is almost similar between ground source and air source. However, what we've noticed in our territory is that homes that install ground source heat pumps are typically larger in size than air source heat pumps. So the dollar value will be higher, even though it's the same percentage. I don't have the exact number, but I think the takeaway, I guess, at the high level is that with ground source, the increased efficiency that ground source brings, closes that gap between electric and gas a little bit more. The second question was whether Con Edison is tracking the total electric and gas combined bill for clean heat customers. Not something we are tracking actively right now. I mean, it's something we are researching. For example, as part of the study that I presented the results, we recognize the importance of not just bridging the upfront cost gap, which is what the clean heat program is really for, but also understanding the customer experience after the conversion, which is why we're researching the bill side, but not something we publish anywhere or track for any programmatic purposes. It's really just for research purposes.
Well, thanks, Dimitris. One thing I am taking away from the chat and the questions is there's a real desire for a rate sort of visualization tool, a tool that will show you your costs after heat pump versus without. And I'm sad to say to Kula Addy, Samantha Edel, Greg Nettleton, MU, Vince Fuentes, Barbara Blumenthal, that I do not know of such a tool. Dimitris, maybe you can enlighten us. And I should note that Greg Nettleton in the chat has put that Project Heat Pump is creating a calculator of this sort. So you can check that out. But Dimitris, do you have any further thoughts on the visualization tool?
Yeah, no, I think I and others here at Con Ed agree that that's really, I think, a useful tool to make available to heat pump customers or prospective heat pump customers. I mean, we recognize that, explaining rates to people, the mass market, it's not easy. They're not very intuitive, and having something more visual is, I think, important. But I think the other side of that coin is that, because rates are complicated, rate tools are also complicated. And there's always a balance between making something very precise and complicated versus something that's a little less precise, but simpler. I mean, we are currently going through this journey on our side, try to build we don't know yet if it's going to be a rate comparison tool. I think we're calling it a rate education tool, something that would just simplify things for our customers. And we're hoping we'll have something live soon, just recognizing, again, how valuable it could become.
I'll note that PG&E on their website for customers has a rate comparison tool, but things change when you're switching a heat pump for gas. And so it's a little bit more complex. Madeline Fleischer in the chat just put notes that said they created their own tool for Central Ohio using Excel. Central Maine Power, Luke Miller has just noted that they have one. It's complicated because what you want is not just something that shows you what you're using now compared to historic trends, or even what you're using now compared to your neighbors. What you need is what you're using now compared to what you would be using if you were under business as usual. And that is difficult. Many times the utilities don't have access to the gas bill, and maybe the gas bill is gone now because you've electrified. So it's a
Right.
complex thing, and I think that there's definitely a market and a demand for this sort of tool. So if anybody's out there putting that together, let us know.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
Reuven,
ahead.
I'll just jump in briefly. I was heard a presentation from tool development like that last week, and one simplification that apparently satisfied both experts and users was not to model the customer's very specific house, which I think has all these data challenges, but have some archetypal houses in the area, and it's close enough. You have a single family home with 2 stories in this area. The modelers modeled it and could provide insight for that similar house, and that seems to work well with customers.
Thanks, Matt. Kara, I do have some questions here for you, mostly about heat pump availability. There was a lot of chat about, the heat pumps just aren't available in the stores. Donald Vitelli writes, I tried to replace my 2-year-old gas water heater, but it failed, but it wasn't in stock, without a 2-week delivery schedule. I need it now. Matt Brogren says, yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Distributors not stocking things enough. Bob Sewell mentions, I believe some heat pump manufacturers are running into supply issues due to the refrigerant transition. Any comments on that?
That is a problem. I mean, it's a problem. And we had been working with the Biden administration, making sure that we're sharing information we were getting from the contractors around the country, and we're sharing the same information with the Trump administration. There are concerns also about some increased costs as a result of new tariffs. So there are supply chain issues but part of it is a good thing, right? Like, I mean, not a good thing, but a example of suddenly there was a demand. There was a sudden spike in demand as a result of the IRA that led to a result of a lot of policies that were emerging in different states that were promoting electrification. So it was so as a result, in the places where there was a lot of electrification, heat pump suppliers were leaning those directions because and we were seeing economics work, right? Policy and economics work together in that way, whereas the supply chain was getting, but we were having those issues starting during COVID, and we were still recovering from supply chain when things were stuck in ports. And so heat pumps were really stuck during COVID. Then there was a sudden spike in demand as a result of new incentive programs. And so I do think that things are getting better. I'm hearing less complaints about supply chain recently, but then just recently, many contractors got their letters from distributors related to the tariff. So I think that there's going to continue to be some challenges, but and the biggest problem with that is that most HVAC upgrades are done during emergency replacement, and emergency replacement people don't have the time to be able to they can't wait. They turned it on and it didn't work, and they turned it on because they needed it. So that's really the challenge. If they don't have something else like a wood stove or something else they can use during that time, it is really a challenge for supply chain can be an additional barrier. But that's another reason why we really need to educate our contractors to be talking about this with their customers when they go and they do a service on that gas furnace, and to say, hey, your furnace is 15 years old. Did you know about these new incentive programs? Did you know about this new rate structure? Do you know that we could probably we could move this, and this was what could happen for you? So having those conversations and getting people thinking about it ahead of time, so that whenever the best way to electrify is to be able to actually plan that out. If you need to have more insulation to really make it a successful transition, those are the things so the more that we're talking about it and educating homeowners and getting the right marketing materials out there, the better. And kudos to all of the utility companies who've really also been pushing that.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And okay, we're down to 9 more minutes, so we don't have too much time for more questions. But Matt, there's a bunch of sort of clarification questions with regard to peak electricity use that I think we should address. Sarah Conklin asked the very basic question of why are heat pumps used most during those peak periods? I don't think we exactly covered that. And then there's what from there, Bob Sewell asks, won't the peak periods change as more people adopt heat pumps? Nick Young asks essentially the same question. Um, and then Bob Sewell also says, won't winter power become less abundant and therefore more expensive as more people adopt heat pumps? The grid relies more on solar energy, declines in production during the winter. Mike Headland has a similar question. Like, I expected the uh, rates to go up in the summer. I'm not seeing that on the graphs, although I do think in the main graph it was pretty apparent. But maybe you could just comment on peak periods and whether those will change as people adopt heat pumps more. Matt, you're muted. So yeah,
Thank you. Pardon me.
classic.
Longer term, I think that is going to be an issue. But as I posted in the chat, when the residential end use consumption survey was done in 2020, the states where we analyzed, they didn't even report the percentage of heat pumps in those states, right? Because it was so low. So this isn't. I think at present, heat pump users are overpaying, right, with flat rates. And so sure, longer term, maybe this is something to reconsider. But I think at present that this is not something that should be, I think, stopping us from making this more fair. And then regarding this issue of winter discounts versus summer cost increases, I also looked into this while we were talking, and in Maine, that winter discount is offset with higher costs in the summer, but in Colorado and Minnesota, it's not. It's just a discount that applies only in winter, and the summer rates are the same. So hence why the cost didn't go up in those graphs. Thanks for noticing.
I also would note that we make recommendations not just on rates, which are a short-term solution, but also longer-term solutions like federal investment policy changes that really need to bring electricity costs down relative to gas. Dimitris, there's a few questions about energy efficiency upgrades. So Elizabeth Connolly asks, did the customers in the study also receive weatherization services? And Danielle Manley asks, is there any sense of what efficiency or envelope upgrades might have been done alongside the installations in the New York City area?
Yeah, this is a good question. The sample that we looked at, which was a very small sample, was about 80 customers, did not participate in, say, like a weatherization program or anything like that, at least through Con Edison's programs. So we don't have that wasn't, analyzed as part of this, but we did do some hypothetical analysis as part of this study too, where we essentially reduce the heating load that we're observing in each home, assuming that an attic insulation type of project before the heat pump was installed. What would the impact be on customer bills? And it's definitely a no regret strategy, and something that we spoke about peak demand and the impact of winter peaking on the system. One of the best strategies we have that helps both customers reduce their bill and also reduce the peak impact on the system is to weatherize homes before we install a heat pump or even after installing a heat pump. So that's something that we definitely want to grow and invest in the future, the opportunity to combine efficiency upgrades that reduce the heating load in tandem with electrification.
Thanks, Dimitris. Yeah, efficiency always saves energy on top of the electrification. Very key piece. And I just want to note that there's been a lot of, in the chat, lots of folks have been putting in their calculators for visualizing the price differences between electric and gas. So for interested folks, please check that out. Kara, I guess this is a pretty basic question, but maybe you can cover it just to make sure it's taken care of. Bob Sewell asks, for contractors, is the knowledge to install heat pumps really that different than for central AC systems?
So I think in terms of being able to install it is different than their kind of thinking it makes the right sense. And anyone who, many people you may talk to about who've gone through a called a contractor and had an air conditioner break and say, I want to replace it with a heat pump. Their initial response is, you should just replace it with an air conditioner, because box flipping is usually the fastest and easiest way. So what we need, it's not necessarily a training situation, though it is in terms of sizing. I mean, we want to make sure that you have an air conditioner and you have you have your furnace. And now if you're moving entirely to the heat pump, you just need to make certain that you have the sizing appropriate, both the ducts and understanding the thermal envelope. And so training is really critical for whole house, I think, from that perspective. So here's the training, and apparently this room doesn't want me to talk anymore, but apologies for that. It's a very efficient room. But I do think that there is a great opportunity for training here for contractors to help them understand that they can utilize their knowledge and be a part of this new revolution of electrification, and not necessarily stand in the way. And I also saw in the chat somebody had said about the blowing cool air. I didn't mean that the heat pump blows cold air, but what comes from the heat vent from a heat pump versus if you had a gas furnace feels different. And it just has a different feel, and a homeowner might think it's not working, and when it in fact is working, and it's working perfectly exactly the way it's supposed to. So and the biggest issue for our contractor is not to want to roll a truck. Every time they roll a truck, I had one contractor say to me, if I roll the truck more than twice, I start losing money. And so the more callbacks, the harder the problem.
Thanks, Sarah. We have a ton more amazing questions and great chat discussion. I'm really sorry, but I do need to cut it off. I'm respectful of everyone's time. Everybody in the panel has access to the chat and the Q&A. They can reach out directly. I encourage folks on the panel to put their email addresses, if you're interested, into the chat so folks can reach out directly with their questions. And I'm just going to move to the very last slide here I have, which is, hang on just a moment here. Okay, I just wanted to make a preliminary announcement. This isn't fully announced yet, but keep an eye open for the Bear Hub, Behavior Energy Action and Research Hub at ACEEE. Will be providing no-cost behavioral science technical assistance for energy challenges, whether it's in transportation, buildings, or industry. If you are running a program and you would like our help, ACEEE, and you applying behavioral science principles to improve uptake or participation, please reach out to us. We will have a website out hopefully at the end of the month, maybe early next month, but keep your eyes open. You can always email me if you're interested or want more information. And finally, if you're interested in the nexus of behavior, energy, and climate change, there's only one conference to go to, the Behavior, Energy, and Climate Change Conference, or BEC. This year, finally, after 2 years, we're back in Sacramento in person. So if you're interested in that, please check it out, November 2nd to 5th this year. That's it. The link to the report is in the chat. It's also here again. We really appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you to our panel. And feel free to reach out with any questions you have. And take care. Have a wonderful rest of your week.